We'll have to do it all again. Um, so sorry, everyone. We were in the room and we were chatting away like it was.
Oh, it was amazing conversation, just
It
incredible.
was. I mean, we've just come up with the way that we're all going to be wealthy beyond our wildest dreams by the end of the year. But we can't
But
remember what
we
we
can't
said now.
record it, and it won't be
um,
recorded. So
and that was yeah, that was my fault. I forgot to hit the start broadcast. We've been here for a little while, but nothing major's happened. I've been tempted to get into a trade which I did not take, and there we go. We haven't lost too many people anyway. Anyway, yeah, there was a trade that I didn't take, and actually it is kind of going to the upside. We were just talking about Trump and Kim Jong Un. Just quickly on the FTSE, this is long. You know, there's no real kind of question that we should be looking for long. There's one little niggling thing that I've got on the technicals, which suggests that there could be problems with this long, and I'll quickly show you what it is. And it is basically that this chart pattern that we've got here, which is this head and shoulders. But the fundamentals are pointing to upside. There doesn't seem to be too much in the way of resistance now when it comes down to the China and US trade situation. So.
your screen share, mate. I can't see your
Oh,
screen.
sorry, buddy. Yeah, yeah. There we go. This is what we got. We got this head and shoulders pattern here, and that technical pattern is keeping me out this long. But I don't really have too many doubts that this is going up. But I can't trade it because the technicals don't really give me the opportunity to do that, and I've got to take the rough with the smooth in this kind of scenario. And for me, this is going to be a bit of a learning curve as well, if you like. I'm going to see whether the fundamentals can completely trump the technicals, because the fundamentals, as I say, are good. We've had overnight the announcement that there may well be no tariffs whatsoever. The weekly looks pretty good. You know, the fact that we did not kind of break. What's that mean?
Is that right? There may be no tariffs at all.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, there may be no tariffs whatsoever, and you know we're getting fairly close to that announcement. It seems. Looks like they're going to recoil on all of it.
Extra tariffs or no tariffs, full stop, free trade.
It seems like there's going to be no tariffs. I may have heard that wrong. It's only been in the last 15 minutes, but I'll show you the result of this so far. So interestingly, this is starting to come back a bit, but this is the Hong Kong index here, moving quite nicely to the upside. The Nikkei as well really liked the announcement that there would be a lack of tariffs on Chinese goods. So that started to move also into positive territory. The Shanghai Composite is also took a bit of a swift move to the upside, and we can see that this is the opening bar. Interesting that it's giving it up. Actually, I'm glad I looked at this, because this may well change the picture for me. So maybe this is a developing story, but it seems that they are making an announcement that is the case. Back to the FTSE 100. This is the left shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder. In saying that, we did have a little move to the downside, which has now been taken out. It may be that we're looking at this line instead, which is just on top of that level there as well, which is another reason I can't really trade it here. So I've got a little bit of a problem here, mate, and because the reason I've got a bit of an issue is that if this does manage to break out, then there's plenty of room for the upside. What I really wanted, I was looking at this on Friday, and when this was developing on Friday, the market was still in this area here, and I have to say, if it had popped up a little bit more, if it popped up to here, to the trend line on Friday, I would have taken the short. But that didn't happen, and it seems this morning we're up to the short. So this really is my sell zone. You know, I was really keen to try and get this into the downside, but the two reasons I can't go downside is that the charts aren't in agreement. The time frames aren't in agreement, and if anybody knows about Einstein's theory of relativity, is a little bit like that. I don't know too much about it, but I do know that the theory of relativity is about the speed and movement of something depending on your particular position, and it's the same. You know that the relatively speaking, the market is weak when you look on one time frame and strong when you look on another time frame. So, agreement. I don't really have the stars in alignment for me to make a decision. The fundamentals, certainly, if we're thinking about the geopolitics of the China dispute, then that would suggest upside. And what would be of interest to me is to see whether that particular statement will end up trumping everything else to do with the technicals and just give us that move higher. Or whether we remain caged, or whether there's maybe a different story out there, because it could be to do with Brexit. It still could be to do with the ECB. I mean, we got the ECB, did you say Wednesday?
Wednesday, yeah. Oh, no,
Wednesday, and there's Thursday, and there's some, there are some commentators that are actually assuming that Mario Draghi may well come out and say that there is further easing somewhere along the line, further supporting an economy, a European economy which is failing, and possibly some further loan purchases as well. So I don't know where the market is kind of getting its read from. As I say, if it's the China story, then we should be all in to the upside. But maybe, just maybe, and I'm not saying that there's a huge possibility of this, but maybe this manages to hold here. And if it does, and it sweeps aside those trade war announcements, and this head and shoulders is still in existence, I would be really keen to try and look for downside, because in that way, if the news that is being so far reported is really about weakness in the European economy, then we should see this further down. But I'm just in a little bit of a quandary, if I'm honest, mate. My gut is saying that this is going to go here, but my brain is saying just stay out, because you're just not sure. And if you get into the upside and then it comes down, then I'll be kicking myself. Whereas at least if it pops forward, I'll say I'll just wait until the next one is a bit clearer. And I'll get in at that point. So it's early enough in the month for me to ignore this, even if this ends up being a really nice sweeping move. But I might well be out of this market for a couple of weeks if it does just start to sweep forward, because it's going to have to go without me, unfortunately.
I was a little bit surprised when you said pardon me, this may be the Chinese deal coming out, because we've got a summit with Trumpy and Xi Jinping on March 27th, and I thought that was widely to be where they'll announce whatever they're doing. But maybe there's rumours flying left, right, and centre. Who knows? That's kind of what I was reading in here. So
okay.
We'll see.
Sorry, mate. I'm just reading it. It's agreement could end most U.S. tariffs, conditional on China meeting their side of the bargain, effectively.
Okay.
Yeah. So it seems like there's no real meat on the bone with the announcement just yet, but it certainly seems that that is potentially imminent.
A source briefed on negotiations said on Sunday. There you go. There's the rumor, guys.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's just a rumor, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Reuters is saying.
That's what Reuters is saying, right? Well, I mean, there's no particular setup for downside just yet. I like the area for downside, but there's no real setup for downside. So I think I've got a little bit of room to breathe here, rather than having to dive in at this particular point. The hourly chart would probably have to make it through this area anyway, which is where we're pretty much where we are. And if it's not to make it through that area, then we might start to get something of a squeeze here. And that squeeze looks like it would exist along this particular level here as well. So I'm quite happy to see if this does break down. And if it breaks this area, then I probably will go short. If it breaks this area, I may still question the long, depending on other aspects. But it's a case that sometimes you're looking for these indicators to unwind, and I have to say, the longer term indicators would have concerned me when they were up here because they were a bit overbought. But as the market has just managed to ease back here, the indicators have unwound sufficiently enough to give us some room to the upside. And there is some room to the downside. So we are really in a state of decision, which is kind of a good thing, because it means that a pop and a back test of either of these two lines looks to me like the trade and the direction that we'll probably see for a little while at least.
Okay, let's take a quick look around the Forex Factory, because we weren't broadcasting at that stage. And a couple of things I just want to take note, because it's going to probably mean my bias, certainly on the Aussie this week. The Aussie, as always, has a big week the first week of the month, and this week will be no different. First, of course, it's always the first central bank to release its interest rate announcement. That it will do tomorrow, and that's tipped to be exactly the same, no change. I would be surprised if there was, as will the market, and the market will move dramatically if there is on the Aussie. The big question, I suppose, on the Aussie, more than anything, is which way is it going to go when it does move. And the Reserve Bank has been saying for some months now that the next move is not necessarily going to be a rise in interest rates, and that's kept a lid on the Aussie, that's for sure, in the last few months. And I can't see them changing that statement at all. But one thing that is positive for me on the Aussie, and I've kind of got a little bit of a bullish outlook until these numbers prove me wrong, because we've got a good GDP figure forecast on Wednesday. Sorry, we've got a decent retail sales figure on Thursday, and I think the market might be just, if those numbers hit, and even if they're better, then the Aussie could rally this week. So I'm kind of looking at it in that vein at this point in time, that we might have an Aussie that at the very least won't be losing ground on anything. So I'm a little bit on the Aussie side this week. Of course, there's interest rates on the CAD and the Euro as well, and the relevant press conferences that will accompany those. So reasonable week. NFP tops it off, of course, on Friday, when we will close it out. Looking at the charts, I'll start with the Euro, and up until the last 30 minutes, this looked like it might be of interest to me early on, because we've got a monthly pivot that's been hammered and hammered and hammered all of last month, of course. I don't know why. There's obviously no change. Let me just zoom in on that. Or is this? Oh, this is March. Sorry, I thought this was last month. I'll catch up, guys. Don't worry. So already this month, you can see that the monthly pivot is under extreme scrutiny, if you like. And we've had 3 attempts to get below it. We've had one attempt to really take off to the upside, which was curtailed dramatically on Friday. Why? Why'd that happen? Both on Thursday and Friday. Late Thursday, I was gone by then, and I was not trading on Friday, so I really don't know what happened here. Anyway, that being as it is, we're back here again, and guess where that number is? That's that 113.60 number that I bark about all the time. We have been hammering this level for ever and ever and ever, apart from a few movements away from it. If you have a look at the monthly chart, even we go back to post the big fall, pardon me, when Brexit first hit the headlines, the big fall, and then this level here, which is exactly where we are right now, has been hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered, broke back to it, support. So that's where we are. It's a very, very critical level, and one that price doesn't want to get away from too often, certainly in the last decade or so, well, 5 years or so anyway. So here we are again, and what do we do this time? Is it going to be support on the way back down? my little range here suggests that that may be the case. So if we do come back inside here, I'll be looking for upside. If we stay below here, then maybe even retest the monthly pivot now that it's, well, certainly on the 4-hourly chart, looking like it may be a forgotten level for the next 4 hours or so, and we get a retest of that area, that would give me a bearish outlook. But until that happens, then I can still see this level here. Maybe that news you're talking about, Ash, is starting to, although we've just had an open, that's why the chart's moving, sorry. We're now in UK session, so you'd expect a bit of movement. So I'll be watching this level very, very closely. And if it holds up as support, then, and we get back inside this range, in particular above the monthly pivot, I'll probably be looking for a bullish flavor. But here's the Aussie I was talking about. And again, we're pretty much at the bottom of a range. We haven't really hit it. We've got a pivot here, and we've got the monthly pivot here again. The daily pivot and the monthly pivot and the weekly pivot, I think, are pretty close together. I think I'm looking for higher lows here. When I say I think, I'm looking for higher lows here. And until I get them, I'm not confident which way we're going, because we could easily come down to the bottom of this channel. And if I look at the 4-hour chart, that seems to be a distinct possibility, as we have a confluence here of daily pivot and top of descending channel. We are in a range, of course. That looks like a pretty decent diamond pattern for you, Ash. I don't know anything about diamond patterns, but it looks like one to me, and maybe that's significant, maybe it's not. But I think it's pretty tough to go along here right now from a technical point of view, but the fundamental point of view that I just mentioned has me a little bit interested. So if I see any sign here that this can go long, then I'll probably maintain that bias. We are at a little bit of a support level, there's no question. So let's see what happens there on the smaller time frames as we get into this session and beyond. Maybe Monday's not the day. Maybe it's Tuesday, maybe it's Wednesday. I don't know. But I'll be watching for upside at the moment. Pardon me, as we move into the week. Cable, as always, interesting, but always questionable with this incredible Brexit scenario that we haven't really spoken about yet today. Don't know that there's anything that's changed. If you are thinking that nothing's changed since we last spoke, then there's probably plenty of more upside for the pound, and this might be just the place to get back in. I'm not convinced that I don't know too much about what has happened over the weekend, but you can see that there are two pivots here, the daily pivot and the weekly pivot, maybe, and of course the market's gapped long today. If there is a retest, or a test, if you like, of the daily pivot and the weekly pivot at the top, sorry, at the bottom of this channel, that's kind of given me a hint that there may be some upside here. Certainly, I won't be the only person looking to buy the dip there. I wouldn't have thought it is at a decent level. So that's kind of where I'm at on the pound. If I'm completely aware by the time I look to get into the market of what happened with Brexit over the weekend, I suspect probably nothing, but Ash will tell us about that. If there has been something happen, then I'd like to see the market react to that first, I'd have to say. Dollar yen took off big time on Friday, or Thursday and Friday really, and looks to be in consolidation now. Whether that manifests as a consolidation pattern, then that's yet to be determined also. I'll be looking to trade this at some stage if it does complete or stay completely inside that range. But at this point in time, it's just a guess as to whether it's going longer or it has reached as far as it wants to go for now. So guesswork for me. If I see a clear reversal pattern and then a lower high, I'll get interested. But until that happens, no, thank you. Euro pound is interesting. We're still in this trade, of course. I have moved, I think, Wednesday, Thursday, can't remember, when I moved my stocks to entry, and we hit our TP2, so we're off. We've taken 2 lots of profit on this, and I'm not going to do a thing now until we get down to this level here, around about the 84 mark. I'm just going to let that go until it gets there, if it gets there, of course. So there's no certainty that will be the case, and then I'll reassess. But I've only got 1/3 of the position left, and I think that's probably a good thing to do. Just let it go. If it comes back and hits the stop, then so be it. We've done pretty well out of the trade, and looking for potential very, very well out of the trade if it goes our way. In terms of what to do now, look, I don't see this as anything clear just yet. We've come off the weekly pivot, well, what's now the new weekly pivot, but it's this level here that we've bounced off, that the market has rejected, with this bar here on Friday. Very, very tough now to get into that, I would have thought, because you've now missed that part of it, and I wouldn't be looking to get into that trade in any way, shape or form. So I'd probably be looking at the potential for a right shoulder to form here. If that's the case, then I'm not going to trade against my trade. I don't see any point in that until it's crystal clear that this level is broken. Maybe that's a bullish sign. If this level here does break, it's probably going to be the neckline. So on balance, I don't see that I need to do anything here, frankly. I'll just wait and see what happens. The other trade that we took on Wednesday or Thursday, when's the daily bar? We traded this bar here anyway. When was that? Tuesday even. Maybe Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, last Tuesday. We traded this bar. This is Euro Yen on the daily chart. Finally, that took off. Took a while, but finally it took off. And we have banked again twice on this one. You'll excuse my dog, Angus. He's a little bit anxious because there are people outside, which I may have to go and investigate just a tick. So nothing to do here. We've banked twice. Same scenario. We've got our stop in a reasonable position at break even. The weekly pivot's probably protecting us there, and so are these highs. So I'm not going to do anything. Just leave my stop where it is and wait for something next to happen. And if it's bounced off weekly pivot, maybe I'll look to increase my, or get back into the trade. Scale back into the trade is the word I'm looking for. At this point in time, nothing to do. So really what I'm looking at, Ash, is the Aussie to show me something. At this point, that's my favourite way. And I'm not sure where that's coming from just yet.
Yeah,
maybe a break of this channel and a retest, and then I look to trade it long. It's pretty tough to go long right now.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lack of clarity, isn't there? I've got, I suppose, a similar conundrum with the FTSE. I think, interestingly, the FTSE hasn't taken out this level, and if the assumed furore that was surrounding that announcement from China was to take heed, then I would have suggested that would have gone already, and that hasn't happened. So my bearish stance on this is coming a little bit more into the fore again. Pretty keen on this again. The pivots here on the hourly are suggesting.
Sorry to butt in. I've got to leave you for about 5 minutes. I'll be.
Yeah, you go. You go.
Cheers.
Okay, so we've got yeah, so it's a bit of a conundrum here, as I say. We got pivots that could well hold up the price to the downside. We've got just a little bit of resistance up here on this trend line, which could hold up price to the upside, and that just really tells me that we should probably wait this one out. And the fact, as I say, that the excitement and furore that we thought would take hold of the FTSE this morning has not established itself. Now, I will have a quick look at some of the other markets and see how things are going. I did see that treasuries were slightly lower, with yields popping to the upside, which would suggest that some of those safe havens, if you like, holding some of the US treasuries, don't seem to be the way that anybody wants to play this. So that they seem a little bit happier with a bit of risk on. But we'll see how that establishes itself throughout the day. But this is really a story that needs to unfold, and I'll show you some short-term time frames. So this is the 5-minute chart here, and the 5-minute chart before the market opened gave us this this hammer here, and market did pop forward, but it's just struggling to really make up any further grounds, and it might be that we're in this situation and scenario throughout the day. Looks like this trend line is just tight enough to leave us below the weekly pivot and maybe even the daily pivot, depending on what time that day happens. And taking both these two areas out, plus the trend line, I think would be a pretty strong signal. So I'm going to wait on that and see if I can get my my setup that I need to get me into the market. This is the thing about sometimes when the fundamentals don't match the technicals, and this is where I'm being patient. Sometimes I'm quite happy to take a trade regardless of what the technicals are telling me because the fundamentals are so strong and so obvious that it's a bit of a no-brainer. But they don't seem to be that clear, particularly when we just looked at those other markets. So again, we're going to look at the Chinese markets because this is the these are the markets that should have reacted positively to that news, and it certainly did when it started, but it's just drifting right the way back down again, and pretty much looks like it's back to where it started on the open of the day. This is this is the opening kind of price action area here. This is the opening bar, I think, just this one here. So we're not too far away from the open on the Shanghai Composite. We're going to check the DAX. So let's have a look at some of the European markets. European markets are looking looking pretty weak. So all markets now are starting to point to the downside, which is, as I say, much better for me. That's certainly the position that I'd like to take. I don't know what this is about, and I will have to do some further digging. It's not that easy to dig around when you're also looking at charts and presenting. So I will have to do a little bit more digging to see if the story has developed, or whether the announcement was just a bit of hyperbole from somebody. But it was reported on respectable news feed, so I'm surprised that I would be surprised if it just was a bit of hot air. But it looks like we're just going to wait it out. And what could be happening is that the market didn't actually announce anything, but it announced a possibility and a greater possibility of a deal. But without a genuine announcement, then it just wants to stay in a range, which is another reason that I'm not too keen to take it too early. I want to see it pop down first, and then see if we can get something. Now let's just have a quick look at the treasuries and see what's going on with those, just to see if that can give us any more information and give us any kind of leaning in a certain direction. And it might be that with the US market closed, it will be all we can do to guess and have to wait for the US to open up. Let me just check though. Let's see what we got. Okay, so Treasury yields. Here we go. So I'm looking at the US 10-year. This is the US 10-year that's going on here. Let me just change the time frames here. And what I want is, okay, for some reason that's not showing me candles. Let's change this to an hour and see if that gives us candles. No. Oh, it doesn't seem that we're going to get candles here. I don't know why. I think the key thing that we have to look at. We're not going to get candles, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is, let's see if they change that now. What matters is that we can see price, and price is the price is really starting to come to the downside. So we have just seen this pop forward just a little bit. Hold on, this is very much delayed. Actually, this is the right price though.
Hey, I'm back, mate. When you're ready.
No worries. I'm having a bit of a problem. Bit of a problem getting the right price here. This is the right price that's been reported, but this is not up-to-date data. I'm just going to have a look at another feed and see if I can get see if I can get another feed on this. Just because the 10-year might give us some indication of what may happen. My preference is for downside, and just the fact that we're not popping forward is filling me with a little bit more confidence that we may well be on the right side of the assumption here. But I need a little.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
On the feed that I was looking at, it was only showing the 28th of February, and I'm not sure why that was. So I'm just going to have a quick look and see if I can find it somewhere else. Here we go. Let me just see if it's on here. US. Here we go. 10-year. Let's see what that's saying. It's been updated. No, I don't seem to have the ability to get the price for the US 10-year. But the point is really that the US 10-year is going to express that there might well be a little bit more confidence. But I've just been looking through the Asian markets again, and they're almost where they started before the session kicked off. So I'm not sure what's happening, but there seems to be a developing story here. Yeah, I can't seem to get the price that I need for the US 10-year. I don't know whether maybe Yahoo Finance might have it. Let's just check.
But you don't know if that story's related to trade wars or Brexit or what?
Well, because of the way that the Chinese markets are moving now back to the downside, I suspect it's to do with the trade wars, and it might just be that the trade wars haven't, there's not enough news yet, and that's why the market is just a little bit tepid on it. But we don't have enough to go on. We don't seem to have enough information to make a real decision, and. Possibly, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the news not being around could ease this market down until the news actually does establish itself. So, really, I do want to go long on the market in the medium term. But what I don't have right now is an area that I'd like to go long at. We're way above where I'd like to see us. Okay, so what we do have here. Here we go. Let's just have a look at the 3-day now. This is the US 10-year, and if we look at what's going on today, it just looks like with the yields coming down, there just seems to be a little bit more, maybe just a little bit more confidence in the risk on that the market is reporting. It seemed that the price was right on that last one, but it just didn't seem to give me the right kind of data. But yeah, it's just easing down now. It's not that up to date. It's on a bit of a delay, so we can't use this too closely. But this is going to be worth watching. Maybe later today. And the reason I say later today is that we don't really have enough price action here to suggest one thing or another. We're caught in a very, very tight range so far. I mean, the range for the day so far is 16 pips, which is incredibly small when we think the FTSE can quite easily gobble up 100 pips in a fairly short period. But for the first 15 minutes, that is often a decent barometer of what the market is thinking and suggesting, to have not moved is probably saying there's something on the horizon that either we don't know about, or that needs to establish itself further before we can make any trading decisions. So I have to say, mate, if I was alone, I'd be shutting this whole thing down and walking away for probably the afternoon and until the afternoon. I don't have anything that would suggest that I'm going to get a driver on the horizon from what I'm reading. We'll have a quick chat about Brexit, unless you've got anything specific you want to look at. I know you've got 5 minutes before half an hour charts. I don't know bars. I don't know if you want to look at that first.
Yeah, look, it's a little interesting, but completely against my my analysis, really. But I'm keeping my eye on Aussie yen at the moment, and I'll show you that chart. Ready, set.
Yeah, this looks like a bit of a keep your money safe day so far. The way this is shaping up, I don't like the look of this market at all.
Yeah, look, given my bullish outlook for the Aussie this week, at least until the numbers prove me wrong, then I'm thinking this is a reasonable place to be looking for a bounce here for Aussie yen. This is kind of. I'll show you this performance chart that I like to look at now. On Finviz, I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. And I'm finding this very, very useful with looking at relative strength, really, at the end of the day. And I like this part of the chart. I think it's great. You can do it on a daily, weekly, monthly, month to date, quarterly, half year, year to date, on the major currencies. So if you put a line through, well, here's the strongest currency this week so far, in relative order. So the weakest currency is the Swissy, strongest currency is the pound. You've got to be careful here. You just don't jump in and trade the pound long against the Swissy, because you've then got to bring that relative strength back into perspective. It may be at the top of its strength, if you like.
Yeah, and also I suppose you have to ascertain why, don't you? What's made the pound so strong, and we know what the underlying factors are of the pound, and as I say, we'll get to maybe some of the detail on that in a little while.
Yeah, but I tend to look at probably 3 or 4 of these in concert with each other. Not so much the daily today, because it is Monday, it's a tough day to trade. But if you look at weekly, monthly, and maybe quarterly, you can get a fair idea of which currency is strong and which isn't. And the weekly is telling us that the Swissy and the Euro are weak. The monthly is telling us, pardon me, if we go there, I'll go away. The monthly is telling us quite a different story. They're telling us that the Swissy is strong. The yen remains the constant, however. Everywhere I look, I see a weak yen. Maybe half yearly might be different. Yeah, it is. But on the smaller time frames, the yen continues to bob up as one of the weakest currencies. And when I saw an opportunity to trade euro yen last week, jumped on it for that reason, because the euro was up here and the yen was down here. Quite the reverse so far this week, but and that's what you've got to be careful of. You've got to be very careful that you don't use this as your only guide. You've got to then have a look at, okay, where is the euro in terms of support and resistance, whereas the yen in terms of support and resistance. If you find, pardon me, one at resistance and the other at support, and it doesn't correlate with this strength chart, then you need to not trade it. But if you've got quite the reverse of that, so something that's backing up what you're seeing on here, then that's the time to jump. So I think this is a great tool if you're not on top of it or you haven't seen it. You can do all sorts of things down here. You can track exactly what's going on, not only with currencies. You can do it on just about anything you like, futures, cryptos, all sorts of things up here that you can choose. I'm not affiliated to this in any way, shape or form, guys. So the only reason I'm telling you is out of interest, and I find it very, very useful. So finviz.com if you want to have a look at it. Getting back to that, what was I talking about? Aussie yen, wasn't I? So let's go and line those two up. On the daily basis, you've got the yen as third weakest, and you've got the Aussie as third strongest. Okay, that's something we can look at on a weekly basis. We've got exactly the same thing. Guess why? First day of the week. Monthly basis, we've got Aussie the weakest. So that's telling a completely different story, isn't it? And for that reason, I'd probably not use this as an indicator. But I would have a look at where they both are in terms of support and resistance against another currency. So, for instance, the dollar. Aussie appears to be at a support level. And the yen, where's dollar yen? There. Dollar yen appears to be at a resistance level. So, if you can see that there. So I'm thinking, okay, yen, therefore, is potentially going to strengthen against the dollar, or the dollar weaken against the yen. And the Aussie is probably going to rally against the dollar, it being at support. So again, that's not giving me a clear picture at all. It's telling me that they're both going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm really not keen, therefore, to go into Aussie yen with any preconceived idea that we've got a one stronger than the other. So really what I'm saying is that's no help at all. But if it were different and they were giving me different signals, then it would be a big help. But I'm at a support level here, no question, on Aussie yen, and there's probably a worse place to go long than here. That said, I'm looking at the 30-minute charts. That really doesn't give me a lot of confidence that this can go short until there's a close below the daily and weekly pivot. So really I'm thinking long is the way to go here. Is this the candle I want to trade? Well, it's not a bad one, I wouldn't have thought. How big is it? Yeah, it's only a tiny candle. For that reason I'll stay out, but I'll have a look at this on the hourly chart, and if we do get a better candle in terms of size, then I'd be happy with that. But the reason I don't trade 7-pip candles, especially on anything against the yen, is this can move very, very quickly. 7 pips is nothing. This can go 7 pips in a heartbeat, and then long, and I'm out of business. So I need something a little bit better than that, although it is a decent place to be looking for a long here, I would have thought. But the relative strength isn't backing me up on that. So for that reason, I'm happy just to stay out and see how it all pans out. So I don't have any confidence as yet, Ash, and I think more than willing to just see what happens. Even the Aussie that I'm, kind of keen to go long on is not giving me any confidence here either. Yes, we're at a support level. It's only soft support, but it's support. But we're below the daily pivot. We've had a bounce off the top of the descending channel. So to go long here is not a great idea, in my humble opinion. I need something a little better than what I'm seeing at the moment. And the euro and the pound, you're going to tell me about as to what the Brexit situation is.
Yeah, I mean it's not a great deal to report. A couple of bits of movement over the weekend. The ERG, which is the European Research Group, who are Brexiteers, and probably the harder element of the Tory party, Brexiteers, have softened their stance a little bit, and it may be Theresa May may be starting just to pull a few things out of the bag, which I think that there was always a suspicion she could do. But the ERG are starting to soften their position on the hard border in Northern Ireland. And rather than having their hard lines on the situation in Northern Ireland, about the Attorney General coming back with absolute assurances, with a legal document that would say that we wouldn't be caught into a permanent backstop. They seem to be maybe happier to just accept an advisory on that now, which could change things significantly, because I can't remember the numbers of the ERG, but I think there's probably about, so it's between 30 and 80, which I know is a little bit wide, but I've got a feeling it's towards the lower end, but I'll have to look into that. But 30 extra votes could actually have a little bit more of a knock-on effect, which could get Theresa May's deal a little bit more. She could find some legs with the deal on that particular front. There's also some bribery going on with the Prime Minister, who are going to some of these Leave constituencies, because the thing with the Leave constituencies is that the MPs aren't necessarily voting for the deal, which would enable us to leave the European Union, and the Leave constituencies may or may not want them to vote for it, but if they voted to leave, then because all we have on the table is this particular deal where we could leave, which is Theresa May's, then it might be the only way for the MPs of those constituencies to appease their member, their voting audience. So what Theresa May's done is she's bribing those areas by saying, we will give you money. She knows that most of those that the Leave areas are in the north of England, and she wants to give the people in those areas in the north of England more money than those in the south of England. So that would put pressure on those MPs to back her deal. So she's just starting to figure out ways that she could get her deal through Parliament. Now, when you think that it was the biggest loss in 1,000 years of parliamentary voting, losing by 230 votes, she's got a lot to claw back. But I guess with this kind of thing, a few people can actually cause a chain reaction, which may well see enough strength to eventually carry the vote through, and that's what we're starting to see happen. We're starting to see her really kind of use every single tool that she has in her bag to try and get her deal through. Now, obviously, there are MPs that are saying the money that she's offering will not be enough, and the money that she's offering will not be anything in comparison to what they will lose when they leave the EU. But that may not be enough, and it's interesting because most people that voted for Brexit, appearingly seem to be quite happy with a hard Brexit. What they want is a complete break. And what fascinates me is the language that comes from the government in saying that anybody blocking her deal is not allowing the will of the people. But to my mind, the will of the people was not this particular version of Brexit, because there's no way that they could have known what this particular version of Brexit would eventually look like. So,
and a great point. They didn't know what Brexit looked like in the first.
No, they didn't. Well, unless they because the thing is, what we were told was no customs union, no single market, and we'd be out of all this stuff. Effectively, we'd be completely leaving the EU. And if that's the case, the only real thing that gives the voter what they voted for is a hard Brexit. So anybody that's kind of coming back with a deal really is not giving the will of the people, and I find all these arguments just that they really are kind of walking on very kind of very thin ground and thin ice when they make those types of arguments. So how that eventually pans out and how the British people eventually see that, I don't know, because I think there was going to be a lot of people that that would have voted for Brexit who would actually be quite angry of the deal that Theresa May is eventually bringing back, and if that gets voted through. But it's going to be an interesting week because Wednesday week is when we get that meaningful vote, and if that meaningful vote,
or not,
yeah, that's when we'll know. That's when we'll know whether her deal is dead or not. She may well try and hold on to it. I don't know, but there's a few twists and turns that I think yet to come. That does mean that trading the pound is going to be a little bit trickier, I would suspect, for the next few days until we really get a little bit more meat on the bones when it comes down to how many numbers she's managed to convert for her deal. And if she converts enough numbers, then I suspect we see the pound strengthen because her Brexit deal is actually soft enough to strengthen the pound. If those numbers don't come in, then I think it goes back again to who's in charge, who's winning the argument in Parliament. But we do have to always remember that Parliament on the whole is a Remain is made up of Remain MPs. So if her deal doesn't go through, I would have to assume that the Remain MPs are probably still in control of this process, and maybe the people's vote still comes back into the headlights from that point. But the people's vote still seems a little bit far away. We're still not sure whether that's going to happen or not. So still a lot of guessing, mate, which is, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because by this time you think that there'd be at least a little bit more. I mean, talk about the doing a deal at the very, very last minute. I mean, you think that this is last minute enough, the fact we're in the final month, but it looks like it's going to come down to pretty much the final 2 weeks.
Absolute wire, as they say. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Movement going on, mate. I'm seeing the Aussie yen I was looking at earlier has just burst through that trend line I was talking about.
Oh, interesting. Well, so we're seeing some yen strength.
I'm not sure. It's not across the board. The dollar yen's kind of holding its own. Euro yen's coming off big time. So yeah, maybe there is some yen strength.
Aussie could be something else there.
Pound yen. Sorry?
Could be something out there that we're not sure about.
Where's pound yen? There it is. Having said that, I'm losing my charts. I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but there's a whole lot of pinging going on. Yeah, that's coming off as well. Maybe there is a little bit of risk coming off the table at the moment.
Well, that would help my particular stance. I would like to see this FTSE lower.
Okay, that seems to be the current flavour of the moment anyway. Whether it's something that's going to continue or not is another story. I really don't know. I'm not a massive fan of Trading Monday, as you know, but it's more a let's get to know what's going on type day for me. It's let's feel our way back into the market and see how we go.
Yeah, and maybe that's what we get. Maybe that's what we have for the whole day. I want to see what happens in the US session, but certainly, if you look at this FTSE 100, the way that this is all being expressed right now is that there's a complete lack of. Am I on my chart here? No, there we go. Yeah, there's just a complete lack of commitment. The first hour is about to shut up. Well, not about to shut up. We've got about 18 minutes left here, but this spinning top is just basically telling us that the last the previous hour, the hour before we opened, was this spinning top. Still got this spinning top going right now. Let's have another quick check back on these Chinese on the Asian markets. Asian market popped to the downside. Looks like it's just clawing its way back up again. But look at this price action as well on the Chinese. On the Chinese market, and this is supposedly off the back of all these trade wars. This is the DAX. DAX is having I guess something similar to the FTSE in as much that it's not really giving any true direction. The Nikkei is just coming off a little bit, easing back to the downside, and you'd suspect that if there was a trade deal done, that would be probably having a much better time of it. Interestingly, let's look at this clean chart here. This on a clean chart, because this might be quite telling. Now that up there is a that is a classic shooting star, in as much that we've got that gap far away, way away from price action there. If this bar ends up closing anything like this, that may well give us an indication that we could be exhausting the move to the upside here. And tomorrow's bar would give us a really clear indication if it ends up closing as an evening star. So I think that the evidence is maybe maybe stacking up to suggest that that the market's running out of a bit of steam here.
Yeah, I'm looking at a few crosses at the moment, or a few different indices at the moment. Gold's coming off. Dow is at a very interesting place. It's challenging the 26,120 level, which is kind of the top of the range that I've had it in since when I go back to January of last year, really. So that consolidation continues, I guess. But we are at a resistance level. Oil, I haven't had a look at oil.
This is oil here. This is oil here. Yeah, which is also quite interesting, in as much that Friday's bar was extremely negative and wiped out price action of the previous two sessions.
Yeah, so maybe a bit of correction around the place.
Yeah, it does look a little bit negative. Let's bring oil up on a 4-hour chart here. I think that may well have broken through an area on oil, and we could start to see oil drifting to the downside as well. I mean, as I say, this is all kind of adding to the evidence for me that the FTSE might well exhausted itself at these highs here, and I have taken a couple of trades in the FTSE to a degree of success. I've had money out of the FTSE from last month, but I would like another one, another shooting star here as well on the 4-hour chart on the FTSE 100. Not quite at a high, but it looks like an area which is fairly high. The gap up that must have been off the back of those trade wars announcements, but the market held. And this particular bar is again going to be of interest. We've got not too long before this closes, but what could end up happening here now? Just to kind of go into some of the patterns that we look for on these markets, just to give us some indication. What we've got is a move to the upside, a gap, and a bar which is just given us some hold, a hold here where it hasn't managed to go one way or the other, some indecision. And this bar here, which is going to close in the next 15 minutes, if this bar cuts into this bar, that gives us that evening star pattern. But what may end up happening rather than an evening star is we get something called a tower top, where you get a couple of bars of hold, and then it's bar 4 that actually starts to drift to the downside. So I'm going to look out for that on bar 4 instead, even though I am seeing.
Okay.
I beg your pardon me?
I said Trump Tower top, eh?
A Trump Tower top, yeah, maybe that's what this is, a Trump Tower top. I mean, the FTSE is maybe starting to pick up a little bit of pace to the downside here. And in the next few minutes, if we do see this daily pivot taken out, then I will be all over this for some downside. I want to see this down and back up again. Let me just give you some more screen here. I want to see this down and back up again, testing this area, and then I'm going to go shorts here. I like the head and shoulders pattern. There's no guarantee this works out, but I love where we can potentially trade this this right shoulder, because it is at the high of the right shoulder. If we can get in somewhere around here, which means that there's a potential profit taking area on the neckline. And if the neckline is taken out, then it does actually give us some fairly decent room, and then we would get. I'm going to do a quick measured move on this as well.
You got a nice confluence there as well, horizontal
I
level.
really like it. Yeah, I really like what we've got here. I'm just waiting for a shorter term time frame to shape up for me, so I can take the short here, and it is going to be the hourly breakthrough. Now, depending on where that breaks, that could well lead us down here. The measured move leaves us right back down to this point, which is, 150 to 200 pips to the downside. So I really like this, and I'm just waiting for a decent technical level to get me in. What I quite like about what's happening with price action is that it's gentle enough to give us that break and back test. It doesn't look at this stage that the catalyst will just take us down and go, which if that happens, then we're just going to have to let it go. But if it comes down, then we should get something of a test of this area, and I will be on top of that. So I am getting a lot more keen on this, and I'm going to try and enter short what would be on the UK 100 at around about 71.10. 71.10 or 71.15. So anybody interested in trading the FTSE short, 71.10 or 71.15 is between those two areas is the area that I'd like to take this one on. So effectively the low of this bar here. Let's see what happens in the next 10 minutes, because we might get a clearer indication of direction, and the direction has to be down. I'm not interested in upside. The direction has to be down. I'm just going to have to trust that the fundamental announcements that are coming out of China so far are not sure enough for us to get a pop up. So let's look for some downside, and then, as I say, this is a medium term trade. We look for the medium term to take us to the downside, pop through this point, get us down here, and then we'll look for the longs somewhere along this trend line and this here. So that would lead us down there probably fairly nicely into next week. So yeah, looks like it's shaping up right now, mate. I'm quite happy with this.
All right, mate. Happy days. I hope that pans out. We'll find out more about it, of course, in the evening session, which is only about 40 minutes away from now. Really, I'm going to leave you with only the Aussie. I think the rest I'm not too keen on, but the Aussie's a little bit frustrating, to be fair. But there's two possibilities here, I reckon, to trade it. That is, there's always more than two possibilities. Up, down, or sideways. Normally, what I've got is a little double bottom sitting here, or tweezer bottom, whatever you want to call it. It's not at a very strong level, which is a little bit of a worry, but it is at a level. There is a horizontal level there, so I'm okay with it, and my bias is long. So if I were to get maybe another trend line across here somewhere, and we get a bit of a false break of that, I'd be happy to take a long here. But I think what probably will happen, if I am to trade this long, I'm probably going to happen, doesn't mean the market will actually go where I want it to, but if it does, the likely trade I would take would be as a re-entry above this level here, the daily pivot and the trend line. And best case scenario, of course, would be if the top of the channel is taken out as well. So I'd want a bar that comes back to here, say, then a retest of 1, 2, 3 levels, and then I'd look to go long, targeting the weekly pivot, depending on the size of the candle, of course. So that would be the trade for me. If it happens down here lower, then better still, of course. Same thing, break. Don't take out this low, however. That's crucial. If that low goes, then different potential entirely. But if we break here, maybe get an equal low above that line, then retest it, then go long. That's what I'll be looking for. But the obvious target here is weekly pivot. If you want to leave something open, if it does pan out that way, then why not? But I am asking this to reverse a fairly substantial, if you like, trend. So Just be aware of that. It's not a fait accompli in any way, shape, or form. So I am biased that way, and I'll look for that as long as it allows me to do so with. And when I say allow me, what I really need to see is a reversal pattern, and I've got that there. I just need to see that higher low to give me the confidence that we can go long. Okay. Catching falling knives are always very, very difficult. So just be aware of that. And if it does set up, I'll be trading it at relatively small stake. I won't be putting a lot into the market to trade this. But that's where I'm at, mate. Aussie counter trend long.
Great stuff. Okay, mate. Sounds good. Well, let's wrap it up, mate, because I don't really have anything else. We're back in about 35 minutes anyway. So I'm going to wait on the FTSE, but I'm liking the way it's looking. We're about 6 or so pips away from where I want to enter. So let's let it establish itself and come back and see if we can get an update.
Happy days. Let's look forward to tomorrow when we'll know a fair bit more about what the market thinks and hopefully be far more confident in our directions. You're obviously confident. I'm not confident yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on where it closes in the next 5 minutes, but I certainly will have a lot more confidence if it closes where I want it to.
Happy days, mate. I hope it does, and I hope it finishes up going down, down, down.
Great stuff. All right, buddy. Well, I'll speak to you in about 35 minutes.
All right, mate. Happy days, everyone. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Yeah, catch you tomorrow. Same trade time, same trade channel. Hope you enjoyed it. We will be we'll be back in 35 minutes if you're part of that show as well, and hopefully have some updates then. Happy trading if not.